You've noticed things about people your entire life that you couldn't explain. The friend whose laugh changed the moment their partner walked in. The colleague who says everything's great, but their hands tell a different story. Your partner who said, let's talk, but the body was already angled toward the door. You saw all of it. You just never trusted what you were seeing. But what if every one of those instincts was right? What if your brain has been reading people accurately for years, and the only mistake you've made is doubting it? And once you understand the psychology behind what you've been doing, you'll never doubt that instinct again. Think about the last time someone said something vulnerable to you. Not a rehearsed confession, just a real moment. Maybe they admitted they were struggling. Maybe they told you something they hadn't told anyone else. Now think about what happened in the 3 seconds after. Did they laugh? Change the subject? Physically move away from you? Make a joke that didn't quite land? That moment, those 3 seconds right after someone lets something real slip out, is one of the most revealing things a human being can do. Because what you're watching isn't a conversation anymore. It's a retreat. The nervous system just registered exposure, and it's scrambling to undo it. The speed of that retreat tells you everything. A slow shift means they're uncomfortable but willing to stay open. A fast pivot, the instant joke, the sudden topic change, the physical step backward, that means what they just said cost them more than they wanted it to. Most people miss this entirely because they're focused on the vulnerable thing that was said. But the real information lives in what happens immediately after. You've probably noticed this 100 times without knowing what you were seeing. And it goes deeper than moments of vulnerability. Your brain picks up changes in people that most brains dismiss as background noise. Pay attention next time someone brings up a topic they're protecting. Not something they're lying about necessarily, just something they're not ready to expose. Watch their breathing. When a conversation gets close to something real, their breath changes. It gets shallower. Sometimes it stops entirely for a second. This tiny freeze that most people would never catch. Their voice might shift register, going slightly higher or slightly flatter. And often there's a physical, self-soothing gesture, touching the neck, adjusting a sleeve, pressing their lips together. These aren't random nervous habits. They're the nervous system doing damage control. The body is saying this topic is dangerous before the person has consciously decided not to answer. You've probably noticed these patterns 1,000 times without knowing what they meant. Now you have a name for it. And the terrifying part is how reliable it is once you start paying attention. Here's one that's going to reframe how you experience every conversation from now on. You mirror people you feel safe with. You do it without deciding to. When you're comfortable with someone, your body unconsciously syncs with theirs. You cross your legs when they cross theirs. You lean forward when they lean forward. Your breathing rhythm starts to match. It's your nervous system's way of saying, I'm with you. And it happens completely outside of conscious awareness. But when that mirroring suddenly stops, it means something. If someone has been in sync with you all evening and then their posture shifts away, their rhythm breaks, their body quietly disconnects from yours, even though the conversation keeps going normally on the surface, that's the moment they emotionally left the room. Their body was still in the chair, but something inside them closed. Maybe something you said landed wrong. Maybe a thought crossed their mind. Maybe they made a decision about you that they'll never say out loud. Most people don't notice because the words are still flowing, but the body already told the truth. And you've been catching these shifts your entire life. That strange feeling when a conversation is still happening, but something underneath it has already ended. That's not imagination. That's your brain registering the exact moment someone's nervous system withdrew, even though nothing visible changed. And this is where it starts to hurt. Because one of the most powerful things you can read on a person is also one of the most painful to see. When someone is performing happiness, their face activates differently than when they're genuinely experiencing it. Real joy engages the muscles around the eyes. It creates the crinkle, the warmth, the thing that makes a smile feel alive. Performed happiness only activates the mouth. The eyes stay flat, still, almost watchful. You've seen this face. You've seen it on people you love. And the hardest part isn't recognizing it. The hardest part is knowing that they don't realize you can tell. They think the mask is working. And you have to decide in real time whether to acknowledge what you see or let them have the safety of their performance. That decision, that constant calculation of when to see and when to pretend you don't, That's the emotional tax that comes with reading people at this level. Nobody talks about it, but you know exactly what I mean. And it doesn't stop there. You don't just hear what people say, you hear what they almost said. That pause before someone answers a question about their relationship. The way someone's voice lifts slightly when they mention a friend they supposedly don't talk to anymore. The extra emphasis on the word fine that turns it from an answer into a wall. People who are high in emotional sensitivity process vocal micropatterns that most brains filter out as noise. Your brain doesn't filter them, it catalogs them, files them, references them later at 2 in the morning when you're replaying a conversation and suddenly realize what someone actually meant 3 hours ago. That replay isn't overthinking. It's your brain finishing a computation it didn't have time to complete in the moment. And more often than not, the conclusion it reaches at 2 in the morning is more accurate than anything you processed in real time. Most people would never think of this next one, but once you hear it, you'll realize you've been using it instinctively for years. Silence. When someone goes quiet in a conversation, most people panic. They fill the gap. They change the subject. They rush to make noise because the emptiness feels uncomfortable. But if you actually sit in that silence, something remarkable happens. People tell you the truth. Not because they decided to, but because silence creates a vacuum that the psyche rushes to fill. Research on interrogation psychology shows that the most effective technique isn't aggressive questioning, it's strategic patience. When you stop talking, the other person's discomfort with the empty space overrides their defenses. Whatever they were holding back starts leaking through. Not always in words, sometimes in a sigh, a shift in posture, a glance toward the door. And you've probably done this without thinking. You've sat with someone in quiet and just known. Known they were hurting. Known they were about to say something important. Known that the conversation was about to crack open. Most people are afraid of silence because they don't know what to do with it. You're comfortable in it because somewhere along the way, you learned that it's where the truth lives. And that's the part nobody warns you about. The people who are comfortable with silence end up carrying confessions they never asked for. People sense that you can hold space without flinching, and they give you things they've never given anyone else. Not because you pushed, because you stayed. Now remember that moment from the beginning? Your partner who said, "Let's talk," but the body was already angled toward the door. That wasn't a random observation. That was your brain detecting something most people would completely miss. When someone feels psychologically trapped in a conversation, their body starts mapping escape routes before their mind has consciously decided to leave. It's not just the feet, though that's what most body language content focuses on. It's the torso, the shoulders, the eye line that keeps drifting toward the nearest exit, even while they're nodding and saying all the right things. This isn't about wanting to physically leave. It's the nervous system preparing for emotional withdrawal. And the fascinating part is that people have no idea they're doing it. They genuinely believe they're fully present, but their body has already made the decision. You've caught this in rooms where someone was telling you they were fine, while slowly rotating their entire body away from you. You've seen it in meetings where someone agreed enthusiastically while their shoulders pointed at the door. You felt it in conversations where every word said stay, but every physical signal said go. That contradiction between language and orientation is one of the most reliable things you can read on a human being. And once you see it, you'll start noticing it everywhere. Here's one that sounds like it should be obvious, but almost nobody actually watches for in real time. People rehearse lies, and rehearsed stories have a fingerprint. When someone is telling you something that genuinely happened, their memory is messy. They shift the emphasis. They add a detail one time and skip it the next. The angle changes depending on their mood. That's what real recollection looks like, imperfect and alive. But when someone is concealing something, their story locks. It comes out the same way every time, word for word, detail for detail. Because they're not accessing a memory, they're performing a script, and any deviation risks the whole thing unraveling. So they repeat it identically. And the more identical it sounds across multiple tellings, the less likely it is to be real. You've caught this before. That moment when someone's story felt too polished, too ready, too clean for something that supposedly happened spontaneously. And you probably didn't say anything, because how do you explain that you noticed the narrative structure of someone's casual anecdote? But you noticed. You always notice. And there's one more thing your brain picks up that almost nobody talks about. because it's subtle enough that most people would deny it's even real. People leak their intentions through the questions they ask, not the statements they make, the questions. When someone asks you about your plans this weekend, pay attention to what they ask next. Are they building toward an invitation or mapping your schedule? When someone asks about your relationship, notice the follow-up. Are they curious or are they comparing? When someone asks how much something costs, listen for whether the next sentence is about the thing or about themselves. Questions are where people's guard drops because they think they're invisible when they're the one asking. They think the spotlight is on you. But the questions themselves reveal exactly what they're thinking about, what they want, what they're calculating. And your brain has been tracking this data in the background your entire life. Every conversation you've had where something felt off but you couldn't articulate why, this might be the reason. You weren't hearing the answers wrong, you were hearing the questions right. So what does all of this actually mean about you? You're not paranoid for noticing things others miss. You're not overthinking when you replay conversations. You're not strange for sensing what people feel before they've expressed it. Your brain processes what most people walk right past. And that's not a quirk. That's a form of intelligence that doesn't show up on any test, but shows up in every room you walk into. Every instinct you've ever had about someone. Every gut feeling you talked yourself out of. Every time you knew something was off but couldn't prove it, so you stayed quiet. You were right. More often than you realize, you were right. The problem was never your perception. It was that nobody ever told you to trust it. So trust it. That feeling in your chest when someone's words don't match their energy. That discomfort when a story sounds too clean. That shift you sense in a room before anyone else reacts. That's not anxiety. That's not overthinking. That's your brain doing exactly what it was built to do. And now you know why. If this video put words to something you felt your entire life, subscribe. And the video on screen right now explores the other side of this. Why the people who understand everyone are often the hardest to understand themselves. I think it's going to hit close. I'll meet you there.